Struggling single mother feeds disabled child, and what he says leaves the father frozen. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now get ready for an emotional story. Emily Roberts wiped down the counter at the Morning Glory diner for what felt like the 100th time that morning. Through the large windows, autumn leaves danced across the Boston sidewalk as she glanced up at the clock, only halfway through her shift. At 27, she felt decades older, the weight of responsibility having aged her prematurely. Her attention shifted to Table 7, where a well-dressed man in his mid-30s struggled with his young son. The boy, perhaps 8 or 9, sat in a wheelchair, his small hands pushing away the plate his father offered with increasing frustration. "Timothy, please," the man pleaded, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and desperation. "You need to eat something." Emily watched as the boy turned his head away, his eyes fixed stubbornly on the window. The father sighed, running his hand through his dark hair before signaling for the check. Something about the pair tugged at Emily's heart. Perhaps it was the dark circles under the father's eyes, or the way the boy's shoulders slumped in his wheelchair. Before she could second-guess herself, Emily approached their table. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I couldn't help noticing you're having a bit of trouble." The man looked up, his deep blue eyes revealing both surprise and wariness. "We're fine. Thank you," he said politely but dismissively. "I have a brother with autism," Emily continued undeterred. "Sometimes he struggles with certain foods too. Would it be all right if I tried something?" The man hesitated before nodding slightly. "I'm Michael. This is Timothy." Emily knelt beside the wheelchair, careful not to invade the boy's space. Rather than addressing him directly, she pretended to organize the table settings. "You know," she said conversationally, "my brother Nicholas absolutely hates when his food touches. He has these special plates with dividers." She carefully separated the items on Timothy's plate, creating distinct sections. "And sometimes food feels too loud." Timothy's eyes flickered toward her, his first sign of interest. "Loud?" Michael asked. "That's how Nicholas describes it," Emily explained. "Certain textures feel overwhelming, like they're shouting at him, but if you make them quieter—" She cut the pancake into tiny, manageable pieces and drizzled just a touch of syrup on one section. "Sometimes that helps." To Michael's astonishment, Timothy cautiously reached for his fork and took a small bite. "That's it," Emily encouraged softly. "Just one quiet bite at a time." As Timothy continued eating, Michael stared at Emily with undisguised wonder. But it was what happened next that changed everything. Timothy looked up, his eyes widening as he truly saw Emily for the first time. "Dad," he gasped, his voice filled with a mixture of confusion and wonder. "It's her. She looks just like Mom." Michael froze, his face draining of color as he finally took in Emily's features properly. The distinctive hazel eyes, the gentle curve of her cheekbones, the way her auburn hair framed her face. "Sarah," he whispered, the name escaping his lips. Before he could stop it, Emily's smile faltered, confused by their reactions. "I'm sorry, I'm Emily Roberts." But Michael couldn't respond. He was too busy staring at the impossible, a woman who was the mirror image of his wife who had died 2 years ago. Michael couldn't sleep that night. The image of Emily's face haunted him, so eerily similar to Sarah's that it defied explanation. Was his grief playing tricks on his mind, or was there something more to this strange encounter? The next morning, he dropped Timothy off at his therapy session and drove back to the Morning Glory. He sat in his car watching the diner from across the street. It wasn't stalking, he told himself. He just needed answers. When Emily emerged, during her break, Michael approached her cautiously. "I'm sorry about yesterday," he began. "My son and we were taken aback." Emily nodded, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the autumn chill. "Your son mentioned I look like his mother." "Yes," Michael admitted. "The resemblance is extraordinary. I apologize if we made you uncomfortable." "It's all right," Emily replied, glancing at her watch. "I only have a few minutes before I need to get back. May I ask you something personal?" When she hesitated, he added, "I'm not some creep, I promise. I'm just trying to make sense of things." Emily studied him for a moment, before nodding cautiously. "Were you born in Boston?" Michael asked. "No, I was adopted as an infant. My parents never told me much about my biological family before they passed away 3 years ago." A shadow crossed her face. "Why do you ask?" Michael's heart raced. "My wife Sarah, she died 2 years ago. Timothy was right. You look exactly like her." Emily's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Michael hesitated, then asked, "What made you help Timothy yesterday?" "Most people just stare or pretend not to notice. My younger brother Nicholas has autism. After our parents died in a car accident, I became his caretaker. I had to put my career as an occupational therapist on hold." She glanced back at the diner. "This job barely covers his needs, and now the place is closing next month." Michael's architect mind was already reconstructing pieces of a puzzle he couldn't yet see. "Your brother, does he receive specialized care?" "What we can afford," Emily replied, her voice tight. "I should get back to work." "Wait," Michael said, impulsively. "I have a proposition for you, a professional one," he clarified. "Timothy has sensory processing issues since the accident that took his mother. He's seen countless therapists, but none have connected with him like you did yesterday." Emily looked skeptical. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'd like to hire you as Timothy's therapist." "Mr. Walker." "Michael, please." "Michael, you don't know anything about my qualifications?" "I'd like to." His eyes held hers. "And I suspect Timothy would benefit greatly from your experience." Emily hesitated, torn between suspicion and the desperate reality of her financial situation. "I'll think about it." As she walked back into the diner, Michael remained rooted to the spot, wondering if fate had just handed him an impossible second chance, or a cruel trick designed to reopen wounds that had barely begun to heal. 3 days later, Emily stood outside the imposing Walker residence, second-guessing her decision. The 3-story Georgian mansion with its manicured lawn seemed worlds away from her modest apartment. Taking a deep breath, she rang the doorbell. Michael answered, looking more composed than at their last meeting. "Thank you for coming, Emily. Please come in." The interior was elegant but showed subtle signs of neglect, a home once filled with love that had lost its heart. Michael led her to his study where files and medical reports were arranged on an antique desk. "Before we discuss anything," Emily said firmly, "I need to be clear about my conditions." Michael gestured for her to continue. "If I agree to work with Timothy, I need complete therapeutic autonomy. I won't have my methods questioned or undermined." She met his gaze steadily. "And this would be strictly professional. A 3-month trial period. After that, we reassess." "That seems reasonable." Michael nodded. "May I ask about your qualifications?" Emily handed him her resume. "I have a master's in occupational therapy with a specialization in sensory processing disorders. I worked at Boston Children's Hospital before my parents' accident." Michael studied the document, impressed. "These recommendations are excellent. Why did you never return to your field?" "Nicholas needed full-time care initially. By the time he stabilized, I'd been out of practice too long." Her voice softened. "And no hospital would accommodate the hours I needed to care for him." Michael leaned forward. "Let me explain Timothy's situation." He pushed a file toward her. "The accident happened 2 years ago. Sarah, my wife, died instantly. Timothy survived but suffered spinal trauma. The doctors say his paralysis may be partially psychosomatic now. He's withdrawn completely since Sarah's death." Emily reviewed the medical reports, noting the progression of Timothy's condition. "And his current therapy regimen? Extensive and expensive, with minimal results." Frustration edged his voice. "Yesterday was the first time he's eaten willingly, in months." Emily closed the file. "I should meet with him before making any decisions." Michael led her to a sunroom where Timothy sat in his wheelchair staring out at the garden. The boy's posture was rigid, his expression vacant. Timothy, Michael said gently, Miss Roberts is here to see you. The boy turned slowly, his eyes lighting up with recognition. You came back, he whispered. Emily knelt before him. I did. Your dad tells me you've been having a tough time. Timothy nodded, then asked with heartbreaking directness, Are you going to be my new mom? Michael tensed, but Emily responded seamlessly. No, sweetie, but I'd like to be your friend and maybe help you feel better. Would that be okay? Timothy considered this, then nodded again. Will you come every day? If that's what we decide. Emily glanced at Michael. Your dad and I are still talking about it. Later, as Michael walked Emily to the door, she made her decision. I'll take the position, but I have one more condition. I need Tuesday and Thursday afternoons free to take Nicholas to his therapy sessions. Michael agreed immediately. When can you start? Monday, Emily replied. I'll need the weekend to prepare and arrange care for Nicholas. As she walked toward the bus stop, Emily wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. The rational part of her brain warned about emotional entanglements, a grieving widower, a traumatized child who saw his dead mother in her face. Yet she couldn't forget the spark of life in Timothy's eyes when he recognized her, a child reaching out from inside a prison of grief and trauma. For the first time in years, Emily felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Whether this opportunity was a blessing or a complication remained to be seen, but she knew one thing with certainty. Timothy Walker needed her, and perhaps that was enough reason to take the risk. Emily arrived at the Walker mansion Monday morning, dressed professionally in a simple blouse and pencil skirt. Michael greeted her at the door, looking more rested than she'd seen him yet. Timothy's been asking about you all weekend, he said, relief evident in his voice. I've prepared a room for your therapy sessions upstairs. As Michael led Emily through the grand foyer, an elegant silver-haired woman descended the staircase, her keen eyes evaluating Emily with undisguised scrutiny. Mother, Michael said, his tone shifting subtly. This is Emily Roberts, Timothy's new occupational therapist. Emily, this is my mother, Olivia Walker. Olivia extended a manicured hand. So, you're the miracle worker my son has been talking about. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Forgive me, but the resemblance is unsettling. Emily maintained her composure. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Walker. I understand it must be surprising. Indeed. Olivia's gaze was penetrating. Where did you say you studied? Boston University, ma'am. I specialized in pediatric sensory processing disorders. How fortunate for us that you happened to be working at that particular diner. The bow. Implication in her tone was unmistakable. Michael intervened. Mother, Emily is here to help Timothy, that's all that matters. Olivia's smile tightened. Of course, dear. We all want what's best for Timothy. She turned back to Emily. I hope you understand that we've consulted the finest specialists in the country. I'm aware, Emily replied evenly. I've reviewed Timothy's files. Sometimes a fresh approach can make a difference. Let me show you to the therapy room, Michael interjected, guiding Emily up the stairs. Once out of earshot, he apologized. My mother has been protective since we lost Sarah. She moved in to help with Timothy. It's understandable, Emily said, diplomatically. Where is Timothy now? In his bedroom. He insisted on wearing his favorite shirt for your first session. The therapy room was perfect, spacious and filled with natural light, equipped with various sensory tools. Emily was arranging her materials when Timothy wheeled himself in, his eyes brightening at the sight of her. You came, he exclaimed. I promised I would, Emily smiled, kneeling to his eye level. I like your dinosaur shirt. Mom gave it to me, Timothy said, his voice quieter. Before she went to heaven. Emily nodded, acknowledging his loss without dwelling on it. I brought some things I thought we could try today. Would you like to see? By lunchtime, Timothy had made more progress than Michael had seen in months. He watched from the doorway as Emily guided his son through exercises that seemed more like play than therapy. Timothy was laughing, actually laughing, as they built. A sensory obstacle course? Remarkable, Olivia murmured, appearing beside Michael. One might almost call it suspicious. Michael turned to his mother. What are you implying? Nothing, darling. Olivia patted his arm. It's wonderful to see Timothy responding. I simply find the timing convenient. A young woman who happens to look identical to Sarah, happens to have exactly the right expertise, happens to need a job right when her workplace is closing. Stop. Michael's voice was firm. Emily is qualified and clearly gifted with children. That's all that matters to me. But as he watched Emily with his son, Michael couldn't entirely silence the questions his mother had raised. The resemblance to Sarah was uncanny, beyond mere coincidence. Yet seeing Timothy engaged and animated for the first time in years overshadowed his doubts. If Emily Roberts was Timothy's chance at healing, Michael was willing to set aside his suspicions, at least for now. Unaware of their scrutiny, Emily continued working with Timothy, her focus entirely on the boy who was finally beginning to emerge from his shell of grief and trauma. 2 weeks into Emily's employment, Timothy's progress was undeniable. His appetite had improved, he was sleeping through the night, and he'd even begun speaking more frequently. Michael observed these changes with growing optimism, his initial suspicions fading in the face of such positive results. One Tuesday morning, Michael received an urgent call from his architectural firm. Emily, I'm sorry, but I need to go into the office. A client's project has hit a critical issue, he explained. Timothy has already had his session this morning, so you're welcome to use the time to prepare for tomorrow. Of course, Emily replied. Take all the time you need. As Michael's car disappeared down the driveway, Emily felt a presence behind her. Turning, she found Olivia watching her with calculating eyes. Finally, a moment alone, Olivia said, gesturing toward the study. Join me for tea, won't you? I insist. In the elegant study, Olivia poured tea into fine china cups. You've made quite an impression on my son and grandson. Timothy is responding well to therapy, Emily replied cautiously. Let's dispense with the charade. Olivia set down her cup with a sharp clink. I've been watching you, studying your every move. The way you tilt your head when listening, the particular shade of your hair. Even your handwriting resembles Sarah's. Emily stiffened. Mrs. Walker, I understand the resemblance is uncanny. But, did you research her? Olivia interrupted. Study photographs? Perhaps alter your appearance slightly? That's absurd, Emily protested. I've never even seen a photo of Sarah. Olivia opened a desk drawer and withdrew a checkbook. I'm prepared to be generous. Name your price to disappear from our lives. Emily stared at her, stunned. You think I'm some kind of con artist? I think you're an opportunist who recognized a vulnerable family. Olivia began writing. My son lost his wife. My grandson lost his mother. They're finally healing, and I won't let you exploit their grief. I would never. $20,000. Olivia slid the check across the desk. Enough to care for your brother for quite some time, I imagine. Emily stood abruptly. I don't want your money. I'm here to help Timothy because he needs me. Everyone has a price, dear. Olivia's smile was cold. If this isn't enough, name your figure. Emily gathered her composure. Mrs. Walker, I understand your protectiveness, but I've done nothing wrong and I won't abandon Timothy when he's finally making progress. As Emily turned to leave, Olivia called after her. You should know I've hired someone to look into your background. If there's anything to find, he'll discover it. That evening, as Emily sat beside Nicholas's bed in their small apartment, she contemplated quitting. The accusation stung, and the threat of investigation unsettled her. Yet the image of Timothy's smile during their session that morning kept her from reaching for her phone to resign. She wouldn't tell Michael about Olivia's threat. It would only create tension in an already fragile family. Besides, Emily had nothing to hide, except perhaps how desperately she and Nicholas needed this job. For a month, Emily balanced her work with Timothy and caring for Nicholas with remarkable efficiency. Timothy was making strides that astonished even his regular physicians, while Michael's architectural firm had begun designing an accessible playground based on Emily's therapeutic principles. But beneath her professional composure, Emily was crumbling. Nicholas's condition had been deteriorating, requiring more specialized care. Last month's medical bills had depleted her savings, and the experimental treatment his doctor recommended was far beyond her means. One evening, after a particularly challenging therapy session with Timothy, Emily received a call from Dr. Maxwell, Nicholas's neurologist. "Emily, I've been reviewing Nicholas's latest tests," he said, his voice grave. "The episodes are increasing in frequency and severity. We need to consider the trial treatment we discussed." Emily stepped into an empty room, lowering her voice. "Doctor, I told you I can't afford it. Insurance won't cover experimental procedures." "I understand, but without intervention." He hesitated. "We're looking at permanent neurological damage. The trial starts next month. Think about it." After ending the call, Emily leaned against the wall, eyes closed, fighting back tears. The treatment cost was equivalent to 6 months of her salary. With the walkers? Emily? Michael's voice startled her. "Is everything all right?" She composed herself quickly. "Yes, just a personal call. Timothy did wonderfully today with the proprioceptive exercises." Michael studied her face. "You look exhausted. When was the last time you took a day off?" "I'm fine," Emily insisted, though the dark circles under her eyes told another story. That night, as Emily dozed in a chair beside Nicholas's hospital bed during his overnight observation, she didn't hear the door open or notice Michael standing in the doorway, watching with concern as she clutched her brother's hand even in sleep. The next morning, Emily arrived at the Walker mansion to find Michael waiting for her, his expression serious. "I went to the hospital last night," he said, without preamble, "to drop off some papers you left behind." Emily froze. "Michael, why didn't you tell me your brother was hospitalized, or that you're sleeping at his bedside instead of going home?" "It's not your concern," Emily replied defensively. "My personal life doesn't affect my work with Timothy." "It does when you're running yourself into the ground," Michael countered. "Emily, I want to help." "I don't need charity," she said firmly, memories of Olivia's checkbook fresh in her mind. "It's not charity to support someone you—" Michael stopped abruptly, then continued, "Someone who's helping your family. Please at least tell me what Nicholas needs." Emily wavered, torn between pride and desperation. "There's an experimental treatment," she finally admitted, "but it's expensive, and I'll figure it out myself." "At what cost?" Michael asked softly. "Your health? Your well-being?" Before Emily could respond, Olivia appeared in the doorway, her timing impeccable as always. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, her gaze calculating as it shifted between them. "Not at all, Mother," Michael replied, his voice cooling noticeably. "Emily and I were just discussing Timothy's progress, but the glint in Olivia's eyes suggested she'd heard more than enough to fuel her suspicions further." Tension in the Walker household had reached a breaking point. For days, Emily noticed Olivia watching her, whispering to Michael when she entered rooms and making cryptic phone calls. Despite this, Emily maintained her focus on Timothy, whose progress continued to amaze everyone. One rainy afternoon, Emily arrived to find Michael and Olivia waiting in the study, their expressions grim. On the desk lay a folder she'd never seen before. "Please sit down," Michael said, his voice unnaturally formal. "What's going on?" Emily asked, remaining standing. Olivia pushed the folder toward her. "Perhaps you'd care to explain these?" With mounting dread, Emily opened the folder. Inside were copies of her brother's medical bills, bank statements showing her dire financial situation, and most disturbing, court documents from 5 years ago. "That case was dismissed," Emily said immediately, recognizing the lawsuit filed by a former employer who had accused her of theft, charges proven false when the real culprit confessed. "I was exonerated completely." "Were you?" Olivia's voice dripped with suspicion. Or did you simply manipulate your way out of consequences just as you're doing now? Michael stood, conflict evident in his expression. Emily, my mother's investigator found evidence that you're in severe financial distress. Nicholas needs specialized treatment costing nearly $80,000. You've made 3 inquiries about personal loans in the past month alone. And that makes me what? A criminal? Emily's voice shook with indignation. Yes, my brother needs expensive treatment. Yes, I'm struggling, financially. I never hid that fact. You never disclosed it either, Michael countered. Not even when I offered to help. Because it has nothing to do with my work here. Emily's composure was cracking. Timothy's progress speaks for itself. Olivia stepped forward. Or perhaps you engineered his dependency on you, making yourself indispensable while playing on Michael's grief with your uncanny resemblance to Sarah. That's enough, Mother, Michael said sharply, but his eyes remained doubtful as they studied Emily. You actually believe this, Emily realized, the betrayal hitting her like a physical blow. After everything, you think I'm manipulating Timothy, manipulating you for money? I don't know what to believe, Michael admitted. The resemblance, the timing, your financial situation. Tears of anger burned Emily's eyes. I didn't even know Sarah existed until I met you. I've poured my heart into helping Timothy because he deserves it, not to extort his family. Pulling herself up with dignity, Emily reached for her bag. Nicholas had a seizure last night. Yes, he needs treatment I can't afford, but I would never use a child suffering for personal gain. She walked to the door, then turned back. Timothy has therapy exercises to complete daily. I've left detailed instructions in his room. I hope you'll follow them for his sake. With that, Emily Roberts walked out of the Walker mansion, her professional reputation in tatters and her heart broken, not just for herself, but for Timothy, who would once again lose someone he had come to trust. 1 week after Emily's departure, the Walker household had descended into chaos. Timothy refused to eat again, speaking only to ask when Miss Emily would return. His progress vanished almost overnight, leaving him more withdrawn than before she had entered their lives. Michael tried everything, bringing in new therapists, implementing Emily's written protocols, even attempting the techniques he'd observed her using. Nothing worked. Timothy retreated deeper into himself, as if punishing them all for driving away the one person who had broken through his walls. Across town, Emily faced her own crisis. Nicholas had suffered his worst seizure yet, landing him in intensive care. The doctors were blunt. Without the experimental treatment, permanent brain damage was inevitable. There's a clinical trial starting next week, Dr. Maxwell explained gently, standing beside Nicholas's hospital bed. Participants receive the treatment at no cost, but there are risks. It hasn't been fully tested. Emily stared at her brothers, pale face, the monitoring equipment beeping steadily beside him. What kind of risks? Significant ones, Dr. Maxwell admitted, but without intervention. Sign us up, Emily said firmly, though her heart raced with fear. We don't have other options. That evening, as Emily dozed in the uncomfortable hospital chair, her phone rang with an unknown number. Ms. Roberts? A formal voice asked. This is Dr. Maxwell's office. I'm calling with some unexpected news. Emily braced herself for the worst. An anonymous benefactor has covered the entire cost of Nicholas's treatment. Dr. Maxwell can begin preparations immediately. No clinical trial necessary. Emily nearly dropped the phone. That's impossible. The treatment costs has been paid in full, the voice confirmed. The donor specified complete anonymity. After hanging up, Emily sat in stunned silence. Only one person had the means and knowledge of their situation. Michael had paid for Nicholas's treatment despite everything that had happened. Part of her wanted to refuse the money out of pride, but looking at Nicholas, she knew she couldn't sacrifice his well-being for her dignity. She would accept this gift, but it wouldn't erase the pain of Michael's mistrust, nor would it bring her back to Timothy, whose absence ached like a physical wound in her heart. Meanwhile, Michael sat in Timothy's darkened room, watching his son pretend to sleep. The boy hadn't spoken all day, refusing even to acknowledge Michael's presence. The house felt emptier than it had since Sarah's death. "I made a terrible mistake," Michael whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was speaking to Timothy, to Sarah's memory, or to himself. In the doorway, Olivia watched her son suffering with growing remorse. Her protective instincts had driven away the one person who had brought light back into their home. For the first time, she wondered if she had misread everything about Emily Roberts, and what irreparable damage her suspicions might have caused. 3 days after Emily's departure, Michael sat in Timothy's empty therapy room, surrounded by the specialized equipment that now gathered dust. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, matching his bleak mood. Timothy had refused his breakfast again, his condition deteriorating rapidly. The doorbell rang, and Michael heard the housekeeper answer it. Moments later, Dr. Peterson, Timothy's longtime physician, appeared in the doorway, medical bag in hand. "How is he?" the doctor asked, his expression concerned. "Worse than before," Michael admitted. "He won't eat, barely speaks. It's like we've lost all the progress." Dr. Peterson frowned. "I reviewed the notes from his last checkup. The improvements under Ms. Roberts's care were remarkable." "What happened?" Michael hesitated, then confessed the confrontation with Emily. As he spoke, Dr. Peterson's frown deepened. "So you fired the one therapist who successfully connected with your son because of financial suspicions?" The doctor's tone was uncharacteristically sharp. "Michael, I've known you for years, but this is troubling. My mother found evidence." "Your mother has been overprotective since Sarah's death," Dr. Peterson interrupted. "Did you verify this evidence yourself?" The question struck Michael like a physical blow. Had he actually examined the documents, or merely accepted his mother's interpretation? With growing unease, he realized he'd taken Olivia's word without question. After the doctor left, Michael retrieved the folder containing the investigator's findings. Reading through the documents carefully this time, he saw what he'd missed before. The lawsuit against Emily had been dismissed with prejudice when another employee confessed. Her financial struggles were real but stemmed entirely from her brother's medical needs. There was nothing suspicious, only a young woman sacrificing everything for family. With mounting dread, Michael dialed the hospital where Nicholas was being treated. "I'm calling about Nicholas Roberts," he said. "I'm a friend of his sister Emily." "Oh yes," the nurse replied. "Such a wonderful turn of events." The anonymous donation for his treatment arrived just in time. Michael thanked her and hung up, his stomach churning. Emily hadn't approached him for money despite her desperate situation. Instead, he'd accused her of manipulation and driven her away. Determined to make things right, Michael drove to Emily's apartment only to find it empty. A neighbor informed him she'd taken time off work to stay at the hospital with her brother. At the hospital, Michael found Emily asleep in a chair beside Nicholas's bed, her face drawn with exhaustion. Her brother, a younger man with Emily's same warm eyes, was awake and watching her protectively. "You must be Michael," Nicholas said softly, surprising Michael with his insight. "She cries about you and Timothy." "I've made a terrible mistake," Michael admitted. "Yes," Nicholas agreed simply. "You hurt her." Michael nodded, humbled by the directness. "I'd like to apologize, to make things right." "That may not be possible," Nicholas replied, more articulate than Michael had expected. "But she deserves to hear it." As if sensing their conversation, Emily stirred, her eyes widening when she saw Michael. "What are you doing here?" "I came to apologize," Michael said, "and to ask you to come back, not for me but for Timothy. He needs you." Emily stared at Michael, standing awkwardly in the hospital room, his normally confident demeanor replaced by genuine remorse. Nicholas watched them both with his perceptive gaze, silently observing the tension between them. "Timothy hasn't eaten properly since you left," Michael admitted. "He refuses to work with any other therapist. He just keeps asking for you." Emily crossed her arms, protective barriers firmly in place. "And what about your mother? Does she still think I'm running some elaborate con?" Michael winced. "I confronted her with the truth. The investigator's report actually cleared you completely, but she selectively interpreted the findings." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I should have verified everything myself instead of taking her word. That's on me, not her. So now you want me back because Timothy won't cooperate with anyone else? Emily's voice was cool, professional. I want you back because you were right for Timothy from the beginning, Michael responded. But I understand if you refuse. Nicholas spoke up unexpectedly. The boy needs you, Emmy. Emily softened at her brother's nickname for her. Since his treatment had begun, Nicholas had shown remarkable improvement in his social awareness. She turned back to Michael. I'll consider returning, but with non-negotiable conditions. Michael nodded. Name them. I'll work with Timothy in the guest house, not the main residence. I won't interact with your mother unless absolutely necessary. Emily's voice was firm. I'll require a formal contract with clear boundaries and expectations, and I want it understood that I'm there for Timothy's therapy, nothing more. Agreed to all, Michael said without hesitation. When can you start? Nicholas begins intensive treatment tomorrow. I'll need 3 days with him, then I can return. Part-time at first. As Michael prepared to leave, Emily added, about the anonymous donation. I have no idea what you're talking about, Michael replied, though his eyes told a different story. But I'm glad Nicholas is getting the help he needs. 3 days later, Emily pulled up to the Walker estate, parking beside the guest house as arranged. Before she could exit her car, the main house door burst open and Timothy wheeled himself down the ramp at dangerous speed, his face alight with joy. Miss Emily, you came back, he called out, reaching her with impressive momentum. Emily knelt beside his wheelchair, her professional resolve melting at his genuine happiness. I promised I'd help you, didn't I? And I keep my promises. As they settled into the newly equipped therapy room in the guest house, Timothy observed her with surprising insight. Dad said he made a big mistake. He said sometimes grown-ups mess up even worse than kids. That's true, Emily acknowledged, arranging the sensory tools they would use that day. Are you still mad at him? Timothy asked directly. Emily considered her answer carefully. I was hurt, Timothy. Trust is important, and when it's broken, it takes time to rebuild. Like my legs, the boy nodded sagely. Dr. Peterson says they're not really broken anymore, but they forgot how to work because of what happened to my brain when Mom died. Emily smiled at his perceptive comparison. Something like that, yes. As they worked through their session, Emily noticed something half hidden under Timothy's blanket, a worn photograph in a silver frame. When he saw her looking, Timothy pulled it out. This is my mom, he said, holding out the photo. Dad said, I could show you. Emily hesitated before taking the frame, her heart racing as she looked upon Sarah Walker's face for the first time. The resemblance was indeed uncanny. The same hazel eyes, the curve of their smile, even the small dimple on the left cheek. She was beautiful, Emily said softly, returning the photo. You don't look exactly like her, Timothy decided after studying Emily carefully. Your eyes are different somehow, but it's okay. I like your eyes too. From the guest house window, Michael watched their interaction, hope blooming cautiously in his chest. The road ahead would be challenging, with trust to rebuild and boundaries to respect. But seeing Timothy's animated gestures and Emily's patient responses, he allowed himself to believe that perhaps, just maybe, they were all taking the first steps toward healing. For 3 weeks, the arrangement worked well. Emily arrived each morning to work with Timothy in the guest house, carefully maintaining professional boundaries with Michael and avoiding Olivia altogether. Timothy continued making remarkable progress, even attempting to stand during physical therapy sessions, something his doctors had thought might never happen again. One particularly bright autumn morning, Emily arrived to find Olivia waiting by the guest house, elegant as always in a tailored gray suit that somehow accentuated her vulnerability rather than her usual authority. May I speak with you, Ms. Roberts? Olivia asked, her usual imperious tone noticeably absent. Emily hesitated, keys still in hand. Timothy is expecting me. Please, just 5 minutes. There was something in Olivia's voice, a tremor of genuine emotion, that made Emily reconsider her refusal. 5 minutes, she agreed, unlocking the door and gesturing Olivia inside. Once, seated in the small sitting area, Olivia seemed to struggle for words, a first in Emily's experience with the formidable matriarch. "I owe you an apology," Olivia finally said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What I did was unforgivable. I allowed my fear to override my judgment, and I hurt not only you, but my grandson in the process." Emily remained silent, waiting. "When Sarah died," Olivia continued, "I lost more than my daughter-in-law. I lost the future I had imagined for my family, watching Michael and Timothy suffer." Her voice cracked slightly. "I became obsessed with protecting them from further pain." "Mrs. Walker, then you appeared," Olivia pressed on, "looking so much like Sarah that it seemed impossible, like some cruel cosmic joke. Timothy responded to you immediately, in ways he hadn't responded to anyone since the accident. And Michael?" She paused. "I saw how he looked at you. It terrified me." Emily shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Walker, I've maintained strictly professional boundaries with your son." "I know," Olivia acknowledged. "You've been more honorable than I gave you credit for." She reached into her handbag and withdrew an old photograph. "This was Sarah at your age." Emily reluctantly accepted the photo, her breath catching. The woman in the image shared her features to an uncanny degree, though subtle differences were apparent. Sarah's eyes were a deeper hazel, her smile slightly different. "Did Sarah have a particular birthmark?" Olivia asked suddenly. "Behind her right ear, shaped somewhat like a crescent moon." Emily stared at her, startled. "How did you know that?" "Because Sarah had the exact same mark in the exact same place," Olivia replied, her face pale. "A genetic trait from my husband's family that appears every few generations." Emily's mind raced. "That's impossible. I was adopted as an infant. May I ask about your adoptive parents?" Olivia's voice was careful, measured. "They died 3 years ago in a car accident," Emily explained, suddenly wary. "My father was a high school science teacher. My mother was a nurse." "Do you have a photograph of them?" Emily hesitated, then pulled out her phone, scrolling to find a family photo taken at her college graduation. She passed it to Olivia, who studied it intently before gasping softly. "This man, your adoptive father," Olivia said, her voice barely audible. "I know him. He worked at Boston Memorial Hospital when Sarah was born. He was an administrator in the maternity ward." Emily took back the phone, staring at her father's familiar face as if seeing it for the first time. "That's not possible. My parents never mentioned any connection to the Walkers." "They wouldn't have known," Olivia said. "They would have only known Sarah's maiden name, Harrison, and they left Boston shortly after." She trailed off, lost in calculation. "After what?" Emily prompted. "After Sarah's father arranged her adoption papers," Olivia whispered, more to herself than to Emily. "My God, it's been in front of us all this time." "What are you saying?" Emily asked, though a strange certainty was already forming in her mind. Olivia looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Emily, I believe you may be Sarah's sister, her twin sister, separated at birth." The room seemed to spin around Emily as the implications settled over her. That's not possible," she protested weakly, even as pieces began falling into place. Her strange connection with Timothy, the inexplicable resemblance, the birthmark no one could have known about. "Sarah's father was a controlling man who opposed her marriage to Michael," Olivia explained. "When she became pregnant unexpectedly at 19, he handled all the medical arrangements. He told us there had been complications. But what if those complications were actually the birth of twins?" Emily's professional composure finally cracked. "I need to go," she said, rising abruptly. "Timothy is waiting, and I can't process this right now." As she fled to the main house on shaking legs, Emily's mind whirled with impossible questions. If what Olivia suspected was true, then Timothy wasn't just her patient, he was her nephew, and Michael. She stopped short in the hallway, unable to complete the thought. Emily struggled to maintain her professional demeanor in the days following Olivia's revelation. She focused on Timothy's therapy with laser-like intensity, avoiding both Michael and Olivia whenever possible. The boy continued to make remarkable progress, now standing briefly with support and engaging in conversations that grew more complex each day. One afternoon, as Emily was reviewing Timothy's progress, notes in the guest house, Michael knocked on the door. "May I come in?" he asked tentatively. Emily nodded, closing her therapy journal. Timothy did exceptionally well today. He stood for nearly 30 seconds without support. "That's incredible," Michael replied, though his expression suggested he had come to discuss something else. "Emily, my mother told me about your conversation." "I'd rather not discuss it," Emily said quickly. "It's speculation at best, and I need to keep my focus on Timothy's treatment." Michael sat down across from her. "What if we could confirm it? Would you want to know?" Emily hesitated. "I don't know. Finding out I might have had a sister, a twin, who I never knew, who died before I could meet her, it's overwhelming." "I understand," Michael said softly, "but Timothy deserves to know who you really are to him if our suspicions are correct." After a long silence, Emily nodded. "You're right. How would we confirm it?" "DNA testing," Michael suggested. "Simple and definitive." The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo as they awaited test results. To channel their nervous energy, Michael proposed converting the empty industrial building his firm had recently acquired into a specialized therapy center based on Emily's successful methods with Timothy. "We could help dozens of children with similar conditions," Michael explained as they toured the building. "Your approach with Timothy combines occupational therapy, sensory integration, and emotional connection in ways I haven't seen before." Emily walked the empty space, her mind already mapping out possibilities. "It could work. We'd need specialized equipment, trained staff, a sensory-friendly design. My foundation could fund it," Michael offered, "with you directing the therapeutic approach." For the first time since Olivia's revelation, Emily felt genuine excitement. Nicholas could help too. Since his treatment, he's shown remarkable insight with other patients on the spectrum. As they collaborated on the center's design, the awkwardness between them gradually dissolved, replaced by mutual respect and shared purpose. Emily found herself smiling more, laughing at Michael's architectural jokes, appreciating his thoughtful insights into therapeutic spaces. Meanwhile, Olivia had embarked on her own mission. Without telling either of them, she had contacted former staff at Boston Memorial Hospital, tracking down records from the maternity ward during the year of Sarah's birth. One evening, she requested their presence in the study. "I found something," she announced, spreading old documents across the desk. Birth records showing Sarah Harrison delivered twins, one with a slight heart murmur requiring temporary monitoring. Emily gasped. "I had a heart condition as an infant. My parents told me I spent my first week in the NICU." Olivia nodded grimly. "Sarah's father told us there had been complications requiring extended hospital care. What he didn't tell us was that those complications were actually the birth of a second daughter, you. A daughter he arranged to have quietly adopted through an agency that was later shut down for unethical practices." Before Emily could respond, Michael's phone chimed with an email notification. The DNA results had arrived. The DNA results confirmed what they had already begun to suspect. Emily and Sarah were identical twins, separated at birth. The lab report stated with 99.9% certainty that Emily shared the exact genetic markers that would be expected in an identical twin of Sarah Walker, née Harrison. For several days, Emily retreated into herself, processing the revelation that had completely rewritten her understanding of her own identity. Michael gave her space, focusing on Timothy and the therapy center plans while she worked through her emotions. One rainy afternoon, Emily sat in the guest house looking through the box of adoption papers she'd found in her parents' belongings after their death. Hidden among tax records and birth certificates was a sealed envelope she'd never noticed before, addressed simply, "For Emily, when the time is right." With trembling fingers, she opened it to find a letter in her mother's handwriting. "Dearest Emily, if you're reading this, your father and I are gone and you've begun asking questions about your origins. We always intended to tell you the full truth when you were ready, but perhaps we waited too long. You came to us through circumstances that were less than ideal. Your biological father was a powerful man who decided, for reasons we never fully understood, that one of his twin daughters should be given up for adoption. We were working at the hospital when this happened, and when we learned what was occurring, we couldn't bear to see you enter the system. We loved you from the moment. We held you. Your birth family named you Elizabeth. We renamed you Emily to protect you moving from Boston to start fresh. We never regretted our decision for a moment. Somewhere in Boston, you have a twin sister named Sarah. We tried once to locate her when you were 5, but her father had moved the family and hidden their tracks. Know that whatever you discover about your past, you were always wanted and deeply loved by us. With all our love, Mom and Dad." Tears streamed down Emily's face as pieces of her life fell into new alignment. She had been wanted by her adoptive parents who risked everything to save her, and by a sister who never knew she existed. That evening, Emily joined the Walker family for dinner for the first time since her return. Timothy, thrilled by her presence, talked excitedly about his progress. "Dr. Peterson says I might be able to try crutches soon," he announced proudly. "That's wonderful, Timothy." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with new meaning at the boy's achievements. Not just her patient now, but her nephew, her only living connection to the sister she'd never known. After Timothy went to bed, Michael, Emily, and Olivia gathered in the study. Michael spread architectural plans across the desk. "The center is coming along," he explained, showing Emily the latest designs. "We've incorporated all your suggestions for the sensory rooms and adaptive equipment." "It's perfect," Emily murmured, tracing the outlines of what would become a sanctuary for children like Timothy and Nicholas. "We need a name," Olivia suggested, gently. Emily looked up at the older woman whose transformation over the past weeks had been remarkable. From suspicious adversary to something approaching family, Olivia had dedicated herself to uncovering the truth and making amends. "The Sarah Roberts Center," Emily suggested softly, "to honor both sides of who she was and who I am." Michael's eyes glistened in the lamplight. Sarah would have loved that. As weeks passed, the therapy center took shape while Nicholas, now fully recovered, began training to work with autistic children at the facility. Timothy graduated to crutches, his determination inspiring everyone who worked with him. Meanwhile, Emily and Michael's professional relationship evolved into something deeper, though neither acknowledged it openly. They worked side by side on the center, exchanged glances over Timothy's achievements and occasionally brushed hands when passing documents, each touch sending electricity through Emily's veins that she struggled to ignore. One evening, as they reviewed final construction details, Michael asked quietly, "Does it bother you, working with me knowing I was married to your sister?" Emily considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I wonder if what you see when you look at me is her." "At first, perhaps," Michael admitted. "But not anymore. You're so different from Sarah in 1,000 tiny ways. Your laugh, your determination, the way you approach problems. I see you, Emily. Just you." Their eyes met across the table, unspoken, feelings hovering between them until Olivia entered with tea, breaking the moment. But something had shifted, an acknowledgement that the strange circumstances that brought them together might lead somewhere neither had anticipated. The next morning, Nicholas arrived at the main house unexpectedly, a folder clutched in his hands. "Emmy, I found something while organizing Mom and Dad's old records," he said, his excitement evident even through his typically reserved demeanor. "Something about your birth family." Nicholas unfolded a yellowed newspaper clipping from the folder. "I found this in Dad's old filing cabinet. It was hidden in an envelope marked Emily's birth family. The small article, dated 28 years earlier, detailed the tragic death of Richard Harrison, a prominent Boston businessman who had driven his car off a bridge in an apparent suicide. The piece mentioned he was survived by his daughter Sarah and his wife, who had passed away years earlier. "Look at the date," Nicholas pointed. 3 weeks after your adoption was finalized. Emily's hands trembled as she took the clipping. "He killed himself right after giving me away?" Michael studied the article. "There's more to this story. Sarah never mentioned her father's suicide. She told me he died of a heart attack. Perhaps she didn't know the truth," Olivia suggested. "She was only a teenager when it happened. Her guardians might have shielded her." Emily felt a strange emptiness where anger should have been. The man who had separated her from her twin sister and biological family was long dead, taking his reasons to the grave. "I have something else," Nicholas continued, pulling out another document. "Dad kept a journal. There's an entry about the day they adopted you." Emily read the faded handwriting. "Harrison came to me today, desperate and broken. He said one of the twins needed to disappear, something about a prophecy his wife believed in before she died. He seemed unhinged with grief and fear. Margaret and I couldn't bear to see either child enter the system. We'll take the baby girl with the heart murmur and leave Boston immediately. God forgive us for the deception, but I believe we're saving this child's life." "A prophecy?" Michael echoed incredulously. "Sarah's mother was deeply superstitious," Olivia explained. "She consulted fortune tellers, believed in omens. She died when the girls were born, complications during childbirth." The pieces began to form a coherent, if tragic, picture. A grieving father, driven by his wife's superstitions and his own unstable mental state, had separated twin sisters at birth, only to take his own life weeks later, perhaps overcome by regret. He thought he was protecting Sarah, Emily realized. From what, we'll never know. 6 months later, the Sarah Roberts Center for Adaptive Therapy opened its doors. The state-of-the-art facility quickly became a beacon of hope for families with children facing challenges similar to Timothy's. Nicholas thrived as a therapy assistant, his unique perspective invaluable in connecting with autistic children. Timothy, now walking short distances with braces, proudly gave tours to visitors, explaining the equipment with the expertise of someone who had used it all. His recovery had progressed beyond anyone's expectations, his psychological wounds healing alongside his physical ones. One evening, Michael asked Emily to meet him at the Morning Glory Diner, the place where they had first met. The restaurant, recently renovated with funding from the Walker Foundation, was closed for the night, but Michael had arranged a private dinner at the very table where Timothy had first recognized Emily's resemblance to Sarah. "I wanted to come back to where it all began," Michael explained as they sat across from each other. Emily smiled, remembering that fateful morning. "So much has changed since then." "Everything has changed," Michael agreed, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Emily, these past months have been complicated, to say the least. Finding out you were Sarah's twin, watching you heal my son, seeing you build something remarkable with the center." Emily's heart raced as Michael continued. "At first, I was drawn to you because you reminded me of Sarah. But I've fallen in love with you because of all the ways you're different from her. Your strength, your determination, your capacity for forgiveness." From his pocket, Michael withdrew a small velvet box. "Emily Roberts, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Emily stared at the ring, a simple emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, nothing like the elaborate engagement ring she'd seen in Sarah's photographs. "Michael, are you certain? I'll always look like her. People will always talk." "Let them talk," Michael said firmly. "I know who I love." 1 year later, the Sarah Roberts Center for Adaptive Therapy had become a nationally recognized facility, with families relocating from across the country to access its groundbreaking treatment programs. What had begun as a personal mission had grown into something that transformed countless lives. On the center's first anniversary, a special celebration brought together everyone who had been part of its journey. The main therapy room had been converted into an event space, decorated simply but elegantly with photographs documenting the center's first year. Timothy, now walking confidently with only a slim cane for support, stood at the podium, his voice clear and strong as he addressed the gathered crowd. Before Miss Emily came into our lives, I couldn't walk. I barely talked. I was stuck in a dark place after my mom died. He glanced at Emily, who sat beside Michael in the front row, tears glistening in her eyes. But she showed me that even when we lose someone we love, we can find new people to help us heal. Nicholas stood nearby, his quiet presence a steadying force as he helped a young autistic boy remain calm amidst the crowd. In the past year, Nicholas had developed an acclaimed program for children on the spectrum, his first-hand experience informing approaches that traditional therapists had overlooked. Olivia, elegant as ever but softer around the edges, sat with an album of newspaper clippings. Her personal project, locating other children separated through the same adoption agency, had already reunited 3 families and sparked a state investigation into historical adoption practices. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Emily slipped away to the small memorial garden behind the center. There, a simple stone bench bore a plaque reading, "In memory of Sarah Walker, whose spirit lives on in every child who finds their way back to joy." Michael found her there, sitting quietly in the fading afternoon light. "Timothy was amazing today," he said, joining her on the bench. "His doctors are calling it a miraculous recovery." "He did all the hard work," Emily replied. "We just showed him it was possible." Michael took her hand, their wedding bands catching the sunlight. Their ceremony 6 months earlier had been intimate, just family and close friends gathered in this same garden, with Timothy proudly serving as best man. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone to the morning glory that day?" Michael asked. Emily smiled, considering the extraordinary chain of coincidences, or perhaps fate, that had brought them together. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are meant to be." As they walked back to join the celebration, Emily caught a glimpse of their reflection in the center's glass doors. Not just herself and Michael, but the family they had created. Timothy racing ahead on his strengthening legs, Nicholas guiding, his young student with gentle patience, Olivia watching them all with quiet pride. They had built something beautiful from tragedy and misunderstanding. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something new. A family bound not just by DNA or circumstance, but by the conscious, daily choice to love and support one another. In finding her twin sister's family, Emily had discovered her own. And, in opening their hearts to her, the Walkers had finally found their way back to wholeness, honoring Sarah's memory not through endless grief, but through the joy of lives transformed.